In the Lab, a Texans podcast that takes a different look at things. Drew Dougherty and John Harris have their lab coats and goggles on, and the Bunsen burners burning. Here's Drew.
Well, hello. It's good to see you. Coming to you from NRG Stadium in my office, and look at that. John's up high. There's a game going on behind you.
Yeah.
Just joking.
Yeah.
Zoom. That was probably a early pandemic joke I should have made. Sorry, gentle viewer, gentle listener. We appreciate you being with us. This is In the Lab. I'm Drew. That's John. John, we are about a month away from training camp beginning, maybe a month, 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun. There will be about 7 open practices for fans. That announcement of which dates specifically, that's coming out in the next few weeks, but going to be some open practices. Should be cool. Haven't had that since 2019. There's going to be a night practice too, we think, which we haven't seen since 2015 when HBO cameras were here. So looking forward to that. It's a different type of heat later in the day. And I like it better. It's not as humid typically. When you're doing it in the afternoon as opposed to during the morning. But, hearkening back a few hours ago, I did a one-on-one Zoom with our good pal, Sean Cody, the nose tackle. And it's part of a series where we've started up. It's called Where Are They Now? Mark caught up with Tony Banks about a week or so ago. I had some fun stuff from him. So I thought, I haven't talked to Cody in a year. Let's get him going. It's been too long. And we had a nice conversation. It was really, really fun to hear from him. As I would not be surprised to hear, and I'm sure you won't either, the guy is going to be opening a restaurant soon. He completed a restaurant management training program, which is awesome. And he's going to be doing that. He also is the color commentator for USC football on the radio. Just started doing that last year. And he was doing radio stuff with USC before that. But it was good to see him, good to hear from him. And we'll have that whole conversation up on the website and on the mobile app here soon. But it's always fun talking to Sean Cody, John.
Yeah, I'm a little envious in some sense that you got to spend time with Sean Cody, and I didn't get into the building until after he was gone. And the few years that he was here, I was actually doing overnight radio, so I was on a completely different life plan, if you will, than 98, 99% of the the people living in the United States at that point. I mean, third shift it's not for the faint of heart. Point being, I'm always envious when you talk about Cody because I always feel like he is one of the he's maybe got one of the greatest personalities I've seen of anybody come through this building. Yeah. Just listen to you talk about him, seeing on the nose. I mean, he was perfect, and he was destined for something in media. We knew that, had a feeling. But I love the fact that he's connected with USC. It's funny because that's how a lot of guys I connect back to is because of their college days. And I just think back to when Kenichi Udeze and Sean Cody were all on the offensive line together, defensive line, the Wild Bunch 2 at USC. I mean, it was really a fun group to watch. And then he comes in the league. And I always remembered him because he always had that big SC tattoo on his arm. It always stood out to me. And he was just –
For Sean Cody. It stood for Sean Cody.
Right. It stood for Southern California. But
he would joke about
it worked either way.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked either way, which I think is hilarious. But he was also, I felt like, one of the more underheralded, underappreciated, underrated players that Texas have had in their history. Look, we've talked about the Mario Williamses and the DeAndre Hopkins and J.J. Watts and Dwayne Browns over all these years. But there's always a group of players that we know, look, they're not going to get these things done without these guys. These are the guys you don't hear a lot about. Luckily for Cody, we did get to hear from him because he was so good with a mic in front of him. He was so good with the camera. So we did get to hear from him. But I don't think people truly voiced how much they appreciated his play and how valuable he was to the Texas defense in those glory years, however you want to call it. But he was incredibly valuable. And I'm glad you got a chance to catch up with him. And hopefully we'll hear that on radio someday. If not, we're definitely going to hear it on the podcast for sure.
Oh, you're going to hear on both. It's funny you bring it up unheralded because it wasn't until he got to the NFL that it became unheralded. I mean, he was Pac-12 Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year he was a captain of their national championship squad. I mean,
yeah,
he was the alpha dog. I mean, when he was coming out of high school,
yep,
Pete Carroll got him to commit to USC, and it was an upset at the time. People thought Cody was going to go to Notre Dame, and Cody kind of started a wave of really high end talent coming into Southern Cal, and they were able to, capitalize and win that title and play for a few others. But yeah, he got here, and I mean, I think he was injured coming into the league, so you never saw like what you'd seen from him in college, but he's still very, very valuable, like you bring up, and it's kind of what we're talking about today. We're going to each chit chat about 2 or 3 unheralded, underappreciated Texans. I think by the fan base and maybe the media at large, I think their teammates appreciated what they did. And
yeah, of course,
Cody played nose tackle. You could probably put every single nose tackle ever played into that conversation, because those guys are universally respected by their teammates for all the dirty work they do. But so you got Cody, and this is not a scientific ranking by any means. This is just guys who come to our mind. You say Cody, I'm going to say a tight end who basically, if you take Owen Daniels out of the equation, he leads the Texans tight ends historically in just about every category. It's Joel Driessen. Yeah. That guy was very solid, always filled in a pinch, was very, very capable. The times that Owen Daniels was injured, he could long snap for you, which he did a bit in 2009. I think there was, because he did it and a few other guys did it that season. Texans wanted some stability. So that offseason they brought in John Weeks. But in the meanwhile, he handled his business and did a good job with it. But Driessen was a guy who really added a lot to this team. He was a good teammate off the field. He kind of, broke things up in the locker room. He was actually the original choice to be the host of On the Nose. We would have called it something differently, but Driessen was like, no, I got to be focused on my play. I've got to take care of business. Cody just has to focus on the A gap and the B gap, and that's it. So that was his joke. But man, you look back at the stats as I pull them up here on profootballreference.com, Driessen was I will forever remember Driessen just being butt naked, wide open off those rollouts, off of a play action pass that we saw so many times with the Gary Kubiak offense. And a lot of times it felt like he was the beneficiary of that. He comes in the league in 2005 with the Jets, but he's out of football in 06. He doesn't play in 06, but from 07 through 11, he was here with the Texans. It's 5 seasons. And he would average about, with us, 12.6 yards a catch. That's good. He had 13 touchdown catches in those 5 seasons, 6 of them in 2011, the year Owen Daniels was out a little bit. Actually, he was in all year, but that was a year Andre Johnson was out. Yep. And Arian Foster, they were out a lot, and they missed a lot of time. So you really relied on the tight ends that year, and Driessen and Daniels helped carry the load. But I'm going with Joel Driessen as one of my undervalued, underappreciated by the community at large, not necessarily within the team guys.
And underappreciated at the mic. We used to have him at a former radio station that I was on. We had a 3-man rotation between David Anderson, Tim Bowman, and Joel. And some of the best radio we did was with JD and with David and Bowman. I mean, Bowman was so underappreciated he was so funny. But I don't think he was around here long enough. My next one is a guy that I loved coming out of college. I was shocked when he went in the 7th round. And it was the very first draft that I was in the building for. And I was shocked he went in the 7th round. And I'll never forget getting him on for an interview that day. Trey Howe was just
good one.
His run of emotion was just all over the place.
It's a good one.
Because he was ticked that it took so long, but he was excited because it was Houston. He was excited to be drafted. But then he was like, I'm going to show everybody that passed on me. And so in 2014, as a rookie, they kept him at corner. That's what he played at Vanderbilt. They played him at corner. In 2015, he transitioned over to safety, and that's when it really kind of took off for him. Now, I do think at corner, he probably could have been a solid player. But moving over to safety with his ball skills, his smarts, his tackling ability, he just made, big play after big play. I think about in 2015 going to Jacksonville. I've got the photo, blown up and hung up on my wall. His pick 6 at Jacksonville, but he had a pick earlier in the game down on the goal line the other way that saved a touchdown. So he had 2 picks in that game. He has the pick 6 in 2016 when the Texans are making that comeback against the Colts on a Sunday night. He had a huge sack of Andrew Luck after Lamar Miller's amazing touchdown, which talk about underappreciated. Whenever we talk about the game, we always forget about Lamar Miller's touchdown, which is amazing. Andre Howe, I think on a second or third down, came up and sacked Luck, and it forced the Colts to have to punt back to the Texans. They then were able to score with C.J. Fedorowicz down the seam and tie the game. But it was Andre Howe making that big play. And, 2018, when we went to Jacksonville, it's interesting because it eventually was overshadowed by Deshaun going on the bus. But Andre Howe is playing his first game since overcoming cancer. And I'll never forget, I was about 30 seconds from doing my pregame hit with the guys back in studio. And he started jogging around the field. And I caught his eye, he caught mine. And we both just kind of smiled. And I just gave him the biggest hug, just like, man, this is so cool. But I don't know that we really appreciated how good and steady he was. And we really missed him when he left. When he decided to walk away from the game in 2019, I mean, we really, really missed having him in the back end because I think Andre Howe with Justin Reed in particular would have made for a pretty solid combination in 2019 for sure. And it probably would have saved some of the issues that we've had at safety since. So I think Andre Howe definitely fits in that category. Unheralded. I keep saying underheralded. Sorry. Underappreciated, unheralded. I think Andre Howe fits in that category, but he will never be underappreciated by this guy flapping his gums right now because I loved him. He was great.
That is a good one. Okay, I'm going to go with a 1-year guy. He played here 2 years, but in 2009, before this guy got to town, the Texans were reeling defensively. Yeah. I mean, it was a bloodbath. They gave up in the first game, they gave up 24 points to the Jets and they only scored 7. Then the next week they went on the road and won, but they gave up 31. Come back home, they give up 31 to the Jags and lose. And I think he got there the next week or the week after. And I'm talking about Bernard Pollard. So that 2009 season, he was really good for the Texans. His first game played was against Oakland because he was inactive against Jacksonville, but they brought him in he'd been with the Chiefs to start his career. But he comes in, gets 4 tackles, 5 total really. And then he just sort of takes off once November rolls around. Double-digit tackles in, the 4 of the final 7 or 8 games. Gets 4 interceptions the rest of the way, forces some fumbles. He blocked a field goal, I believe, at Miami. Really made an impact. And, he was very good that season for the Texans. It didn't go well for him in 2010. Didn't go well for a lot of guys the next year.
Exactly.
Bernard Pollard was a key reason, and one of the reasons, not the main one, but certainly an important reason that the Texans were able to get over the hump and get to 500 from 08 to 09, because that was the first year they got to 500 in 09. Yep. And he was a big reason why they were bleeding a lot defensively, and it got better the rest of the way once he got to town. Yeah,
he was fearless. Yeah. I mean, he was fearless at the mic too. I mean, he didn't mind saying a few things to ruffle some feathers. I find it interesting that we've gone on the defensive side of the ball because I had another guy that I was going to say on the now you did go Joe Driessen, but talk about Sean Cody, Andre Howe.
Yeah, who's your third? Who's your third?
My next one was actually it was going to be Quentin Demps because
he's a good one.
I think QD was fantastic. And it was funny because I remember 2015. So he had been here, then left, and that kind of bridged the gap between me being here. So I get here in 14. He gets back in 15. So I think it was like the 3rd week of training camp he comes in. And you can tell during the first 4 or 5 days, like, wow, he's got a shot to make this team. Not only to make this team, to be a player on his team. And then he made big plays throughout. I mean, he forced the fumble on Monday Night Football against the Bengals on A.J. Green late in the game that got the ball back to the Texans so they could solidify that win. I mean, he had – and then the picks. My goodness, he just went off the next couple of years with picks. He could be a little surly, but if you got to know him a little bit – I remember one time I said something. I can't remember what it was. Oh, I know what it was. I had mentioned something about adding to the safety group, not adding because it was taking somebody away or that the safety group was bad. I just think they needed some depth. And so I wrote something about it, and he found me in the locker room and made a comment to me about it. And I was like, okay. So I won't say that one, even though I just talked about him. I think a guy that stepped in the offensive line that I used to love, and he played hurt so often, Mike Bryzell.
Good one.
We all know about Chester, and we know about Dwayne and, Chris Myers. There's so many people that we know about from that offensive line. But to me, Bryzell was kind of the glue that held it together. He was tough, but he was really, really good in the zone game. And man, he would cut the backside, which you can't do much of that stuff anymore. But back then, it's so funny to go back and watch a Texans game, and you just see guys, defensive linemen, feet flying in the air, linemen go to the ground. You don't see that, and you can't really do it anymore. But he was so good. I mean, so good between Winston and Myers. And I feel like he was unheralded. I do think that he was appreciated. I think people did appreciate what he brought. But I think they talked about the offensive line, and like, oh, yeah, Myers and Winston. And I think he was always the guy that was forgotten.
Yeah,
in some sense. And it just kind of coincided with Dwayne's game going to a different level, Wade Smith going to a different level. And then Bryzell stepping in there and doing the things that he did. I thought he was fantastic. So I'm going to say Mike Bryzell, and under my breath, Quentin Demps.
That's a good one. And Bryzell also, he got hurt as far as people remembering, he got hurt. He was injured a few times. And so he would he'd miss chunks of games, and there are big guys like Charles White in there for him. So, when he was in there, though, that 5-man unit of Brown, Wade Smith, Chris Myers, Bryzell, and Winston, that's the best offensive line this team's ever had. So that's what the standard is, at least for the Texans, that they're trying to get back to and then surpass. Yep. But yeah, that 11 unit, and for part of 10 as well, was a good one. I'm going to stick with the offensive line. I'm going to go with a guy who's still playing. And he was drafted out of Georgia, the draft after the Texans had first gone to the playoffs. So the 2012 draft.
Yep.
Nobody thought too much of him. He was a 4th round pick, 99th player overall out of Bibb County, Alabama. We're talking about Ben Jones. So Ben Jones comes in, and early on, that's the guy that he drank a cup of spa, hot tub water on a dare, and he ate a cockroach on a dare, and he walked around in his bare feet, still does, pregame on the grass. So he's just kind of the goofy country kid. I remember one time I was trying to interview him for like the 2nd time. He's like, I can't talk to you. And I was like, what do you mean I can't talk to you? He's like, because they find me every time I'm on camera because of something stupid I say because of my accent. And so there was always something funny to him. But then the season comes around. He played in every single game. He wound up starting 10 of them at right guard because the Texans were still trying to figure things out. And for that season, he was a starter at right guard, and Derek Newton was a starter at right tackle. And it was Newton's 2nd year. It was his first year to really start because Newton had just been a jumbo package guy or special teams guy. But that right side of the line, they held the line for the right side for the most part. Wasn't as good, obviously, as the Winston-Bryzell combo, but they were so young and they were still good. The next year is 2013, starts once, plays a lot. 2014, they switch him over to the left side because Chris Myers is still there. He plays every game, starts every game at left guard. 15 rolls around, starts every game at center. Yep. So he basically played all 3 interior spots with 42 starts in 3 seasons of playing a whole lot. I mean, he was really good. He was really valuable. And I know he's not Bruce Matthews, but he's started every single game since 2016 when he signed with Tennessee at center. I mean, this is a valuable guy. He's coming up on his 10th year in the league.
Wow.
Really good player. He was so much fun. Brilliant mind. I mean, just whip smart, both football and off the field. Really funny guy. He's one of my underappreciated guys. You could use a guy like that around still. So Ben Jones, he's my final choice there.
That's a great point. And his camouflage suit that matched his suitcase when we were on road trips was at a completely different level. Bro, that's a really, really, that's a good one. It's funny because we didn't come up with any skill players. You mentioned Joel. I should say skill players. It's funny. When we were doing an interview with James Campen, it was funny because it stood out to me because he started talking about perimeter players, and I chuckled and I said, "You can tell you're an offensive line coach because you don't refer to what everybody else calls skill players.
What are offensive linemen not skilled? Yeah, it's a good point by Campen.
Exactly. Really, and so I've thought about that for a long time. And so I would call them perimeter players, but because of that, I've thought about that for a long time. But he reminded me of that. But the perimeter players, I think for the most part, have gotten the acclaim that just due. I think if you would throw one perimeter player in that mix, I think because he sort of bridges the gap between Dominic Williams through to Arian Foster, and that's Steve Slayton. Yeah. If Slayton could have stayed healthy, it would have been scary to see what he could have done, but he just couldn't stay healthy. But man, that 2008 year when he was a rookie, boy, he was at a different level.
He sure was.
I think people appreciated him for it. But looking back, you say, hey, who are the great running backs? It's, Arian Foster, Dominic. I guarantee you they don't mention Steve Slayton. But in 2008, he was as good as he got as a rookie, man. He was unbelievably good.
He sure was. 2009 was rough because of the nerve damage, and he had the fumble issues. But the thought was going into 2010, well, he gets that fixed. And remember, there were people that were saying, well, it's going to be Slate and Tate in 2010 because Texans took Ben Tate in 2010. Well, Arian Foster had a little bit to say about that. And thank goodness he did. I mean, Arian was an amazing back and fun guy to cover. But, yeah, that's a good one. Steve Slayton is we could do it. Maybe one of our next in the labs is 1 year. I don't want to say wonders, but 1 year kind of anomalies or guys that really flourished in 1 year here with the Texans because there are quite a few.
It's a good one.
Yeah,
definitely a few for sure.
John, it's always good to talk with you. Like I said, keep your eye out for that Cody interview. We've also got one that we've talked about on air a bit. Gary Kubiak. We went to his ranch up northwest of here, about an hour outside of town. Had a fun time talking with him. He's going to be the focus of a Texans 360 coming up in the weeks to come. So make sure you'll check that out, and it's going to be a good one. Sound good?
Sounds good, man. I'm looking forward to that for sure, man. I'm envious. I don't like to say that, but I'm envious that you and Coach Coombs got a chance to get together, man. He's another guy up my top of my list that I would like to sit down and talk some ball with. That you guys got a chance to do that and I didn't. So yeah, maybe jealous, envy. I don't know. That's are those two of the deadly sins? I don't know, but chalk them up for me with Coach Kubiak. I'd love to meet and talk with him.
Indeed. All right, take care. This has been an In the Lab. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to know when we post new content.